Doing good. Sorry I missed last week.
No worries. Look, so we'll dive straight into it. So last week, what did we talk about? Can we remember? Even though you missed it, maybe.
The tackles.
Yeah, the tackles. And so what we're going to do is we're going to lead off from those tackles. We're going to talk about the ruck. So just quickly, the first question I have for you guys is, what is a ruck policy? Do you have one? And if you do, are you able to share that with the rest of the people on the call?
Yeah, so we've always gone just because of the level we're at in college. We usually say tackler, get out of the play, become a either a post or a B right off the post, and the second person in, if they see an opportunity to contest defensively. Otherwise, we line up and scrum half over the top of the ruck.
Perfect. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about is ruck policies. What is it, and how effective can it be? And this, again, pretty much like everything else that we've done, is transferable from 7s and 15s. So what we're going to do is we're not going to worry too much around the post and the pillars, or whatever it is that we call the outsides, ABC, post, pillars, because that's more defensive formation. We're going to talk about specifically the ruck policy and the tackle area itself. So once that tackle's been made and that tackle is and the tackle player is rolled away, what is the situation that we have, and what can we do around it, so we're all on the same page? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So go back to our trusty slideshow. And so what we're going to look at is the attack. So imagine you've carried the ball into contact, you've placed the ball using the vice formation that we talked about right at the start of this kind of webinar series. And what we have is a defender coming over to try and poach. Very, very familiar situation. What we want to do is we want to send in what we will call, again, this terminology is just what I call them. It can be called whatever you want. We send in a cannon. And the reason I use the word cannon is because a cannon just blows things up. So if we've got that one player over the ruck, we need to blow them away. So we're not worried about recycling the ball. We're not worried about latching onto the player to try and protect it. We already have somebody over, so we're looking to blow them up. And we're taking them out with one shot. So it doesn't want to be kind of like a 2 or 3 go hit, because they may have tried to contest the ball, and potentially we get given a penalty away because we're holding on or something. So that's what the 1 bullet, 1 kill is there for. We come in, we have 1 shot to blow them out in the water, and then we can move on for the next decision making. What we do then is we have somebody come in that we'll call our sniper. And what that looks like is that player's been blown out. Now that player can come in and just settle over the ball. They can stand in a strong position, settle over the ball, obsess, and look at the picture in front of them. And if anybody tries to come in and hit the ruck, the sniper's there just to pick them off. So I hope you understand this terminology, right? So it's pretty simple. So the cannon comes in and blows them up, and the sniper is there just to protect the ball like a sniper would. Then what we can do from that is the next person coming in, they can come in and move the ball away. So then when we look in the defense, we're looking at our hunter. And our hunter is, if there's a tackle that's been made, our hunter is somebody kind of what we talked about just at the start there in terms of somebody coming in to try and poach. But our hunter is somebody who always comes from the inside of play. Reason being is because a lot of teams will try and play the same direction and play the same way. So if we have somebody coming in from the other side, that will allow us to have space on the outside in attack. Again, in defense, the cannon is there. So if they've got their sniper position, we can send the cannon in and we can try and blow them up and counter ruck. And then if they're already in a strong position and we don't want to send the cannon in, then what we can do is we can just put somebody into the box situation or behind the ruck like we talked about already. Does that was quite a lot straight away, but does that make sense? Are we following where we are?
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. So if we just look at this situation, so we'll talk through these scenarios again as always. 4 is taking the ball into 3. 3 has made the tackle. Okay. If we're looking at the attack, who should go in and be the first player into the ruck?
6.
6. Perfect. So 6 goes into the ruck. Are 1 and 2 red in a position to cannon, hunt, or should they go into the box? What do we think?
They could stand back and think because they're not in a position to really move him out of the way.
Perfect. So they're not in a position because the 6 is in already. So who's covering this box area? Who should cover that?
With 5 being out on the wide side, I would say 1.
Okay. So we put 1 in here. What happens then if 5 will come in because they're the number 3, right? So they're the scrum half, the one who's got to pick and pop or clear. They can come around this option. So we move that out of the way. Where could 1, if 1 stays here, who could get into this box situation? What is red 3 doing right now? What have they just done?
They've hit the ruck, but not won it, so they can bump out.
Yeah, so they can move out, right? So they can come back into this box situation. Okay, and then what we have is we have a solid defensive formation around the ruck. So we have these 3 now because the 3 has worked hard. They've got to the feet. They've got what we call getting big, which means back in game. And they can now get into the position where their attack has to then move the ball out to another player. They can't poach. They can't come around the corner. So if we find another scenario, okay, let's say the ball has been passed from 5 to 6. Okay, the ball's been passed from 5 to 6, and the defense are coming out on a curve. 3 makes the tackle. Okay, who can be the hunter? So the 5 and the 6 are way away.
2.
Sorry, the 4. So who can be the hunter?
2 is one I would pull in, closest man to the ruck.
And so why would you do that?
Mainly because he's the closest man to the ruck. The only other option would be 3 getting back to his feet and taking the ball off.
Okay, so if that's the case, what did we talk about before when we talked about our hunter? Okay, we talked about the hunter is the person always coming from the inside.
All right, so
right?
3.
So it would be the number 1 coming through, right? So again, the ball's been passed from 5 to 6, so 6 is in that position. So the ball's coming from left to right. Ball's being passed. Okay, the 6 is coming in here into this direction. The 3's made the tackle. Okay, so the 1 can then come in and try and poach the ball. The reason being is because if the 2 comes in and they present the ball, the 5 can move the ball straight to 4 very fast, given that space. Whereas the 1 comes in, that then gives the 3 time to get back up, reassess the situation, and maybe come into this position here. Are we following what we mean there? Or is there any questions around that? Yeah, we good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things, right? I'm not saying that this is the right answer and this is what everybody should do. This is just an example of a ruck policy. So we know that when we're coaching our sides, that everybody who's looking to hunt for the ball, who's looking to poach, is going to be the person coming from the inside. This then allows anybody who's made this tackle, they can roll away and get into a position to then defend. How many times have we seen it where we have, let's say the 3 comes in and the 1 comes in at the same time, and they both come in off the feet because they're not balanced or organized? because maybe we don't have that ruck policy in place. What would we do in this kind of situation where the number 3, we're on the edge here. Okay, so the ball's been moved to the edge. The number 3 has made the tackle. Okay, number 1's coming across, number 2's coming across. Here's the box situation. All right, what should the number 3 do here?
Roll out and cover the blind side of the ruck, or the short side of the ruck, I guess.
Yeah, so this space here.
Yeah.
Yep, that's an option. If we look at the line in the field, if we put that number 3 into this space here, who are they covering? Who are they marking?
They're not marking anybody. They're marking a space, I guess.
They're marking a space, right? So
Yeah.
do they need to be in that position?
No.
So we can move them over here into the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's only 5 meters between these channels. It's very rare that we'll have the number 4 pick up and go down this channel. And if they do, they're in a good position to actually stop them. However, if we look at this situation right now, the number 3 is on the edge. They've made the tackle. The inside player would be the number 1. If they come in and try and steal that ball, what does that give the attacking team?
Huge hole there.
There's a huge hole, right? What about if we add some more attackers in so we can actually see? So add some defenders in. Okay, so right now we have the 3s in this situation. Who's got the overload, the defense or the attack?
Defense.
Defense.
Defense, right? So if we throw that player in and we put one there, we throw one in here, we try and compete at this breakdown. What now does the picture look like?
Blue has an overlap, or there's space for blue to attack.
There's a lot more space, right? So we have a 3-on-3. So our ruck policy on the edge could be actually, let's not compete at the breakdown. If we don't compete at the breakdown and we just put the tackler into the box, now all of a sudden we have an overlap in defense. Once we have an overlap in defense, what can we start to run? What type of defense?
Blitz.
Yeah, we can launch up, right? We can take away that space because we have the overlap in defense. So all of a sudden, because we have a ruck policy, we can then win the ball back in a different way. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
If we didn't have a ruck policy, what would probably happen at this breakdown?
You have 2 guys probably go in and they would pick and go around the side of that ruck where there's empty space.
We'd have probably 2 people come in, maybe 1 person off their feet, right? And we'd give a penalty away. They kick for the corner. They get a driving ball try, right? So it's really important that when we're actually looking through these ruck policies, we have an understanding of where on the field do we want to compete. If we want to compete, who's competing? And if we are going to compete, what's our time frame to compete? So if we send that hunter in and they don't win the ball back within 1 second, 2 seconds, are we going to allow them to keep wasting energy and trying to fight for the ball in the ruck, or do we want them to step back out into the defensive line?
Step back out.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of the game, I look at it personally. I look at it in the frame of rugby isn't a contact sport. It just happens to have contact in it. And the more time that we have fighting unnecessary contact battles, the less time we are actually thinking about the game. And the more that we can think about the game, the more effective we can be. So we don't need to spend all this time fighting in the ruck if we're not actually going to win the ball within a second or 2 seconds. If it takes us 5 or 6 seconds to compete for the ball, what's probably going to happen to the 2 defensive lines or the 2 attacking lines? They'll be organized, they'll be in shape, and they'll be ready to actually then counter. So let's say the number 3 steals the ball and the number 1's there to help. Okay, and it's taking them 5, 6 seconds. The number 6 will pull out and the number 4 will pull out. So they can adjust with that transition. Whereas if we win the ball within a second, they're still going to be in that ruck situation, meaning that we can attack around the corner. So if we don't win the ball within a second, just leave the ruck alone. Don't need to go in there. Are we following? Is this okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Do we have any challenges? Any things people would do differently, maybe?
Have we talked at all about which players to set up as hunters?
Yeah. So it would be from the inside, right?
Oh, I'm
So-
thinking numerically, because I think one of the problems we have is we'll have people who aren't necessarily, whether they're the inside guy or not, aren't necessarily great hunters versus guys who you'd much rather have contesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, great question, right? So that's something that we can talk about. It's actually one of our later topics. It's called
Okay.
roles versus positions.
Yeah.
But no, really good question, right? So right now we're in full-time training here at the ARPTC, and what we're doing right now, our ruck policy is that we have a sweeper or a person behind the back play, and they're the only person who's allowed to compete at the ruck. Reason being is they can march across the field, they can have a look, and because we're getting our player coming through, so let's say the Sixers got the ball and they're going to carry it in, we're actually saying that our hunter, this would be our hunter normally.
Right.
We're actually saying that red 6 now is going to come in and poach when they get the opportunity.
Interesting. Okay.
Reason being is because that's where the ball's going to end up if we tackle in the correct way we want to.
Right.
If we tackle in a position where we take legs and what we call a negative tackle, the player lands almost elongated towards the red. Sorry, wrong player. The blue 6 would land elongated towards our side of the field, which means the 6 can come in straight away and poach. Right? If we had a tackle which was positive and we play the player backwards, there's no point in the 6 trying to come in and poach. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the kind of the stuff that we talked about last week in terms of the tackle techniques and the choices of tackle that we make, then would dictate how we actually operate around the ruck. So if we have this number 6 is running a really hard line, we're looking for the number 1 to make a tackle around the leg so they fall forwards. And the number 6 can then come in and hunt. But again, look, these are all just different policies that are out there, and you can make whatever policies that you want. It's just really important and really interesting to, when you watch teams, do they have a ruck policy? And you can then hold players accountable, whether they're making rash decisions because they see an opportunity, or maybe they don't see an opportunity, but they just lose their head and they just dive in, giving penalties away. I'll give an example. I was coaching the New York Athletic Club, and we were playing a game, and we were 2 points up with the last play of the game. Our ruck policy was we're not allowed to compete in the breakdown within the 15-meter lines. Reason being is because we were giving penalties away quite a lot, and we didn't want the other team to be able to then kick the points. Last play of the game, what happens? Somebody's getting really anxious. They go into a breakdown. They start to compete at the breakdown. They go in off the feet. Penalties given away. They kick the 3 points. We lose the game by a point at the end of the game. So what is the conversation then after the game? Why did you give the penalty away? Do we have a ruck policy? Yes, we do. Did you break that policy? Yes. So the feedback is actually then quite simple to give to the player. We have a policy for a reason, right? Whereas normally we just go, right, we'll just dive in. It's like, well, who gave the penalty away? I did. Why? Because I thought I could win the ball. Okay. Right, the feedback conversation becomes a little bit different, and players start to become accountable for their decision making. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, you can make the ruck policy anything you want. You could actually say, no, we're actually going to compete inside the 15s because we want to put as much pressure on as possible so they don't have any options to go left or right. So maybe we could throw 2 or 3 players into a breakdown. If there's 10 minutes left at the end of the game in a 15th match, for example, and we're 20 points down, we need the ball back. So our ruck policy, maybe we're going to throw 3 or 4 players into a ruck and really try and counter ruck and break that ruck down, so that we can go back into this kind of scenario and we go, right, we're going to cannon at every opportunity and try and win that ball back. So the first 3 players can cannon, and then we can bring a hunter in and try and poach. Does that make sense? Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yep.
Is this something that we can take back to our clubs and try and start implementing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent. Okay. So any other questions around ruck policies or decision making around them? What I would say is, so we've been talking now for, I think it's 10 weeks, maybe 13 weeks. And there's been a lot of information, and it's quite simple. There's nothing like here which is probably going, wow, this is unbelievable, like this is brand new knowledge. It's quite all simple things that we're talking about. The beauty of this is that this is ultimately kind of like a session plan for the next 12 weeks, right? Or a season plan for the next 12 weeks of development. Is we can take each one of these tools that we're using and learning on a Monday, we can use that each week and work on those small key factors of the game each time that we plan a training session. So for example, here we're talking around, this week we're talking about just around our defensive shape with the 1 and the 2 defenders, because we have the time to do that here. If it's a club setting, we can spend 30 minutes on a ruck policy and then 30 minutes on the defensive shape. But what we've got is opportunities and kind of, it's kind of like this is, if you had a 14-week season, you've got enough content at the moment to be able to go out and work and get into really deep detail with what we're doing around the ball, whether it's on attack or defense. So hopefully this is quite useful, and we've got a few more sessions to go. I think we've got now, I moved kicking options from this week because it made sense for tackles, but we've got kicking options, and then we've got roles versus positions, which is what we talked about. And the roles versus positions will be quite a useful kind of different way to see the game, maybe. So hopefully that'll be useful as well. Well, thank you for joining my Monday Faithful group. I enjoy these sessions, so please keep showing up. I appreciate your time, and see you next week.
Oh, thank you for doing this, by the way.
That's right.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers.